After 9 years, Justin Trudeau has shown that he's not worth the cost or the corruption. The Speaker has just recently ruled that all House business, all government business must be put aside while members of Parliament consider Liberal corruption. First, we had the case of the Green Slush Fund, the SDTC Fund, where the Auditor General found over $330 million funneled to Liberal insiders' own businesses. She found massive conflicts of interest. Basically, these Liberal-appointed board members who made the decision as to which companies got money, taxpayers' money, from this fund, were funneling that money to their own businesses or to the businesses of their close friends. So the Auditor General has blown the whistle on that, yet the government refuses to hand over the documents to the RCMP. The House of Commons passed a production order demanding that all documents, all information that the Auditor General uncovered, plus any documents that might exist in any government department related to this scandal, be handed over to the RCMP. The government is refusing, and as a result, the House will be seized with this corruption matter until they hand over the documents. And then we have the case of the other Randy, where a senior Trudeau minister is alleged to have been sitting around the cabinet table while also involved in his own business's affairs. His business partner was summoned before committee and refused to disclose all the information, refused to name who the other Randy is, refused to hand over all the documents and answer the questions that were put to him. And as a result, the House is seized with that motion as well. So what we're saying today is that the government will not be able to, the House will be staying on these corruption matters until the Liberals hand over all the documents to the RCMP. While Canadians are suffering with the cost of living crisis that Justin Trudeau caused with his runaway inflation, while millions of Canadians are visiting a food bank for the first time and young Canadians are giving up on the dream of home ownership as housing costs have doubled under the NDP Liberal government, it's clear once again that the Liberals will always stop and enrich their friends while they impoverish Canadians. So I'll hand it over to my colleague who's going to make some remarks in French, and then we can take a few questions.
Merci beaucoup, Andrew. Après 9 ans de ce gouvernement libéral, il n'en vaut pas le coup ni la corruption. C'est assez invraisemblable. Le président de la Chambre a dû interrompre tous les travaux parlementaires de la Chambre pour qu'on puisse maintenant s'occuper et discuter de deux affaires, deux questions de privilèges relativement à la corruption de ce gouvernement. Le premier cas, c'est la Caisse verte libérale de Technologie et Développement durable Canada, des gens qui ont été nommés par le premier ministre Trudeau pour gérer un fonds d'1 milliard de dollars. La vérificatrice générale a trouvé dans une enquête que 330 millions de dollars avaient été directement envoyés dans des entreprises où ces dirigeants avaient des conflits d'intérêts. Donc, c'est une manière tout à fait inacceptable de gérer des fonds comme le Fonds vert. Et malheureusement, le gouvernement a refusé de dévoiler, de divulguer les documents à la GRC pour faire toute la lumière sur cette affaire. On se demande pourquoi le gouvernement hésite à transférer ces documents. Le deuxième cas, c'est l'affaire de l'autre Randy. L'autre Randy, c'est le partenaire d'affaires d'un ministre nommé, d'un ministre senior de ce premier ministre qui a été pris à mentir en comité. Il a confirmé avoir menti aux journalistes. Il a refusé de dévoiler des documents. Il a refusé de transmettre lui aussi de l'information demandée par le Parlement. Donc, on a deux affaires de corruption présentement devant la Chambre des communes qui nous empêchent de procéder aux affaires normales de la Chambre. Nous allons continuer à poursuivre ces discussions, à poursuivre cette question de privilège, tant aussi longtemps que le gouvernement n'aura pas fourni tous les documents nécessaires pour qu'on puisse justement arriver au bout de cette histoire-là. Pendant que les Canadiens souffrent, pendant que les Canadiens ne sont pas capables de payer leur loyer, pendant que les jeunes familles ne peuvent même pas espérer avoir une maison, malheureusement, ce qu'on constate, c'est que rien n'est trop beau pour les libéraux, toujours à piger dans les poches des contribuables canadiens. On ne lâchera pas, on va continuer à faire tous les efforts possibles, à utiliser le temps nécessaire pour faire en sorte qu'on puisse faire toute la lumière sur ces deux histoires de corruption.
Monsieur Scheer, vous avez été président. Ça veut dire quoi concrètement pour les travaux de la Chambre? Qu'est-ce qui va se passer? On n'étudie plus de projet de loi tant qu'on On ne règle pas votre question. Expliquez-nous un peu concrètement.
Alors, le président de la Chambre a envoyé une décision que toute affaire de gouvernement doit être mise aux côtés lorsque les députés on peut débattre la motion sur la corruption libérale. Alors, ça va être l'horaire pour la Chambre pour jusqu'au temps que le gouvernement envoie les documents à la
Donc, ça
au
fait
GRC.
combien de temps? How much time?
Ça, c'est une décision du gouvernement. C'est clair que le gouvernement veut prendre les mesures extrêmes de continuer le cover-up. Ça, c'est
Et en quoi ça sert les Canadiens que de stopper les travaux du Parlement?
Ça, c'est une très bonne question pour le gouvernement. Pourquoi il arrête les affaires du Parlement juste pour protéger la corruption libérale?
What's this going to look like, and how long is this going to go on?
So the Speaker has ruled that the parliamentary that Parliament's rules were broken in this Liberal cover-up. The House of Commons demanded these documents be sent to the RCMP so that the RCMP can determine whether or not there are criminal charges warranted because of this corruption. The government refused to comply with this long-standing power that Parliament has to hold governments to account. And by doing so, the Speaker has now ruled that all government business must be put aside until the House deals with this corruption motion. It's really up to the government to determine how long that will take, but it's clear that they're willing to go to extreme lengths to cover up their corruption, that they're willing to put the business of Parliament off to the side just to protect Liberal insiders. Liberal-friendly appointees to this board funneled money to their own companies. That's taxpayers' money. And while Canadians are paying higher carbon taxes, higher prices at the grocery store, higher mortgage costs with high interest rates, Liberal insiders stopped and enriched themselves. It's never been so good to be a Liberal insider. It's never been so tough to be a hardworking Canadian.
No question period? No anything? What does it mean?
This will be question period, but as to the business that the House debates every day, the Speaker has ruled that these corruption motions must be dealt with before any other business can be done. That's also a question for the government. They control when they assign days, and they control when the House can move on by transmitting the documents to the RCMP.
How are you voting on the block motion today?
C'est assez incroyable qu'on se retrouve dans une situation où le gouvernement a créé une situation très pénible pour les aînés qui ont de la misère à se loger, les aînés qui ont de la misère à payer leurs factures à la fin du mois, à se nourrir. Donc, dans quelques instants, vous allez voir après le vote, après la période de questions, vous allez voir comment on va voter sur cette notion-là. Mais on a toujours eu à cœur les intérêts des aînés. Merci.
Mr. Scheer?
Very quickly, you'll find in a few moments there'll be a vote after question period. What I can say is that there's no doubt that seniors in Canada have had it very tough because of Justin Trudeau's inflation and interest rates taking such a big bite out of their pensions. Conservatives are always on the side of seniors, want to preserve the purchasing power of their pensions by eliminating, putting an end to the inflation crisis that Justin Trudeau caused by axing the carbon tax so they don't have to choose between heating and eating. And you'll see in a few moments how we vote on the motion.
Oh, is that it yet? Mr. Guilbeault, what will the Liberals do if the Bloc says they're going to pull its support after question period?
Well, we'll see. We'll see what the Bloc does. But we felt that what they were proposing was extremely expensive, was socially regressive. I mean, a retired couple of two making $150,000, $160,000 a year would receive more than a single retired woman who makes $30,000 a year. It makes no sense. We've done a lot of things to support seniors since we've been there, and we're happy to continue doing that. This was not the right thing to do, and it's not the right way to do it either. Like an opposition motion that would result in $16 billion of more spending, that's not the way to do things. Happy to work with the Bloc to see what we could do, but that's not it.
What do you make of Premier Daniel Smith and her comments on chemtrails?
I don't know where to start, really. I mean, if a premier of a Canadian province can't stand up to conspiracy theories and start launching accusation against the U.S. government or who knows what about something she knows is not true, and she can't push back on this information, it's very sad for Canada and certainly very sad for Alberta.
I gotta go to question period. What if the Bloc blows up the deal when you vote against them for the motion? What will you do if they say they're not going to collaborate anymore?
Well, collaboration is key in the minority government. That's what we've been doing for the last 3 years, and the Bloc and the NDP know that. I think everyone understands that Canadians are interested in the work we do for them, as opposed to the political game that some of the members of Parliament are trying to play in the House of Commons.
Bonjour. Nous sommes ici, le Parti vert Canada, évidemment. Mon cher collègue Mike Morrice, député de Kitchener-Centre, et moi-même, Elizabeth May. Nous sommes ici pour expliquer notre vote cet après-midi. We are voting for the Bloc motion for a royal proclamation. We had supported this private member's bill, projet de loi éminent de députés, avant, et maintenant nous restons en faveur. But we really want to stress that we think there is room in the fiscal framework to make this work without expanding debt. And we are troubled by, and are keenly aware of, as I've raised in debate on this issue, the intergenerational fairness issue and whether we can look at a budget and say it speaks to intergenerational fairness. For that to occur, we need to identify where the money comes from to ensure that the addition to pension benefits is covered, and moreover, that the fiscal framework overall will improve intergenerational fairness. So I'll leave Mike to speak to the key details, but let's just say that we know that between fossil fuel subsidies and an excess profit tax on fossil fuels, we can do two things at once for intergenerational fairness. We can improve revenues available to the Government of Canada for things people need, and at the same time, we can improve the likelihood that the next generation will have a survivable future.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Just to add that as Greens, we agree with the Bloc that when we look at the $18 billion plus in fossil fuel subsidies, that this government continues to subsidize the fossil fuel industry at that rate, and look at the $3 billion per year that this would require, that there is plenty of room in the fiscal framework, not only to top up OAS by 10% and increase the GIS threshold from 5,000 to 6,500, but to do more and go further when it comes to the housing crisis, when it comes to addressing legislated poverty for people with disabilities and bringing about a fully funded Canada Disability Benefit. We can do more to fill in the social safety net for seniors and for others across the country if we were to be more honest about where the tens of billions are truly going, and that's in the pockets of big oil. It's one of the reasons why we support this motion. I'll pass it back to Elizabeth for any questions the folks might have.
Je veux souligner seulement que c'est vraiment possible d'avoir ce projet de loi éminent de députés et en même temps améliorer la situation fiscale, parce que nous restons comme un pays avec les grandes subventions vers l'énergie fossile et aussi pour leur profit sans impôts. So we want to see real change in addressing the climate crisis for the next generation and improve the affordability crisis for young people as we address the affordability crisis for seniors.
You were speaking about fairness. So what if this new program was to be put on the debt, a more deficit? Would that be...
Ce n'est pas égal. Il reste clair, et je suis absolument d'accord avec les rapports et les études du professeur Paul Kershaw de l'Université de Colombie-Britannique dans le groupe Generation Squeeze, que nous sommes maintenant dans une situation où il y a une inégalité, un grand écart entre la situation pour nos jeunes et nos aînés. We don't want to just see more money available to people like me who are seniors, when we know that it's young people who are struggling and who could never see themselves owning a home, having a life. But at the same time, I was at a Seniors for Climate Action rally yesterday in Victoria, where we were talking about the reality of what's really unfair intergenerationally. It's what Greta Thunberg said.
But then why do you agree with it?
Because we feel, I see it every day, that seniors are also struggling. I deal with constituents who tell me they're one step away from sleeping in their car. We need both, and we can afford both, and we want to make that point very clearly.
Well, wouldn't a means-tested benefit be better? Because this generation of seniors is one of the wealthiest in Canadian history. Wouldn't a means-tested, like doing it through the GIS rather than the OAS, be a better way of doing it?
That's partly what's there.
Well, what we want to see also, of course, there is a taxation system that taxes back where people are really and truly not in need. That's why we prefer a guaranteed livable income that's not means tested so that no one lives in poverty in this country. But these are steps in that direction. We've supported it before, and it is at a point now where amendments to that, perhaps the pressure we're applying today, can assist the Liberal government and the opposition parties in coming up with some modifications. But what this motion is very clear. It's a royal proclamation. And it's not a zero-sum game. That's our main point. This is not a question of this group wins, so younger Canadians lose. That is not necessary, and that's not why we're voting the way we're voting.
And just for the clarity, there is a portion of C319 which does raise the GIS threshold from 5,000 to 6,500. The PBO tells us that 500 million of this is going to go to the lowest income seniors across the country. As Greens, we weren't presented with the opportunity to it's whether we support what's being proposed or not. We support it on balance, recognizing that the funds are coming from big oil specifically. That's where we could be investing in folks with disabilities, in young people, in housing, and seniors.
Do you think a fall election is more likely now?
Oh, we have a polls. Is a fall election more likely? I don't think the fall election is at all likely. We have elections right now in British Columbia, New Brunswick, and Saskatchewan, and it would be undercutting democracy at the level of other governments. And I can tell you, my constituents, who all are British Columbians, do not want to see a federal fall election while we're choosing the next government of BC and seeing a really vigorous debate happening across the hustings. Same thing for New Brunswick, same thing for Saskatchewan. There are strong pressures that mitigate against a fall election.
Is the situation in Parliament, though, is the situation untenable?
No, the situation is tenable. The difficulty is that all of us must behave ourselves much better. And so I call on Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Singh, their whips, to do whatever they can to keep the temperature down and give the Speaker the respect he deserves in order to keep order in the House.
Do you really think that's going to happen?
I absolutely believe it can happen. It should happen. And therefore, I think with pressure from Canadians who would like to see their parliamentarians behave in ways that don't remind them of brawls in the schoolyard grounds, perhaps we can get ourselves to behave. And I do think that can happen, and I do think it will happen. We have work to do.
But who's misbehaving the most?
We'll leave you to decide what can happen. As Greens, we can only speak for ourselves, and we're going to continue to model the kind of behavior that we think Canadians expect in terms of our own constituents and across the country. As parliamentarians should be, we're going to continue to do the same as Elizabeth has done for her entire time here.
But Ms. May, how would you describe the tone? You've been in politics a long time. There's a lot of name-calling. To the extent we haven't seen. How would you describe the tone overall?
Disrespectful, unacceptably disrespectful. I recall when I was first elected, which May 2nd, 2011, Stephen Harper had just achieved a majority government. I do not recall one instance in question period, not once, when the Prime Minister was heckled, and certainly not so loudly that you couldn't hear what the Prime Minister had to say. There was more respect for the office and less of willingness to demonize an individual with ad hominem attacks. And this is on all sides. So we need to actually respect our constituents and do the work they sent us here to do. There are many key pieces of legislation. I will not want to go back to my constituents until Bill C-33 passes. Not one that I imagine you're thinking about, but it deals with anchorages and rail safety and port authorities. We also want to see the bill passed on First Nations sovereignty over their water, C-61. There are many pieces of legislation that have not advanced an inch since we resumed September 16th, and that does require, nous devons faire plus pour le travail que nous avons ensemble. Nous devons travailler en l'intérêt du bien-être public. Et je pense que ce n'est pas trop d'exiger à mes collègues.
What about
prorogation.
You think that's possible?
I don't think that's possible, nor is it. When Stephen Harper prorogued Parliament, that was the first time in the British Commonwealth that a Governor-General had allowed prorogation under such circumstances. They tried it once in Sri Lanka, and the Prime Minister was turned down. We forget in this country that there are principles to Westminster parliamentary democracy, and prorogation is not something that is used just to shut down a political embarrassment.
Speaking of being respectful, a new member, I think, wants to introduce themselves to you before we begin in there. So we'll leave space for that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Actually, thank you. We're looking to get some, the government won't give any more money for projects that include municipalities and Indigenous communities to work together because they don't want to change the Treasury Board guidelines that would allow for bands and municipalities to work together towards reconciliation. The government doesn't allow that today. That is a fact. The pool, yeah. Because if under Treasury Board guidelines, in like a specific First Nation could not apply with the local municipality for joint infrastructure. So our model of reconciliation is not supported by the Liberals, and it's frankly a shame because we're trying to work hand in hand together to do something unique in an area where the Indigenous population is really high and where people generally get along. And all I got was no's, and it's kind of sad.
Are you going to be supporting the Bloc's motion today? Increased OAS payments for seniors?
You know what? I better go up and figure that out, hey? Yeah, good question. I don't even know yet. I got to go read up on what we're voting on. Have a great day, guys.